Have you ever noticed how certain people treat you differently the moment you stop being so agreeable? When you stop saying yes just to keep the peace, suddenly the energy around you shifts. People who once smiled at you begin to pull back. Those who praised your kindness now label you as difficult. And the ones who once relied on your generosity now question your motives. But what if I told you that change is no coincidence? When people can't control you, they don't simply walk away. They evolve, quietly, strategically. And their new tactics? They aren't physical or loud, no. They're emotional, psychological, subtle. They will guilt trip you. They'll twist your words. They'll gossip. They'll bait you into defending yourself. And if that fails, they'll wait for your failure, just so they can feel better about their own fear of freedom. This is not paranoia. This is pattern. A pattern seen by every strong, self-reliant person who decided to take back the steering wheel of their life. And what's wild is, most people don't even realize it's happening. They think, I must have done something wrong. But no, you didn't do anything wrong, you just stopped being easy to manage. This is where Stoic philosophy shines its clearest light. Stoicism doesn't tell you how to fight others. It teaches you how to stop being at their mercy. It reminds you that the greatest power is not in controlling people, it's in refusing to be controlled by them. So today, here on the Chill Stoic, we're breaking down the exact psychological strategies people use when they realize they no longer have power over you, and how to rise above them with grace, stillness, and unmatched strength. Because the moment you start honoring yourself is the same moment others will either respect you or reveal their need to manipulate you. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll see clearly. And clarity, my friend, is freedom. Part 1. They'll try to manipulate you, but only if you let them. Let's start with one of the most common yet hardest to detect tactics: manipulation. When someone realizes they can't control you directly anymore, they don't just give up. They get clever. They get quiet. They get subtle. They'll stop asking. They'll start suggesting. They'll make you feel like you owe them. Like if you were truly a good friend, you'd do what they ask. Or if you were really the kind of person they thought you were, you wouldn't say no. These aren't requests. These are rehearsed lines from a script called emotional leverage. Here's the truth they don't want you to see. When someone can't use force, they'll use feelings. When they can't demand, they'll drop hints. When they can't guilt you outright, they'll flatter you first. And if none of that works, they'll make themselves the victim to make you feel like the villain. It's a game, and the only winning move is not to play. Remember what Lao Tzu said, "He who controls others may be powerful, but he who has mastered himself is mightier still." That's what Stoicism is really about, not becoming cold or distant, but becoming immune to manipulation by being emotionally self-governing. Manipulators thrive on your emotional responses. Guilt, shame, confusion, these are the levers they pull. The moment you stop reacting, the machine breaks down. It's like a chess match. Every sentence they speak is a calculated move. But if you don't move back, they can't win. Their whole strategy depends on your engagement. I'll share something personal. There was a time someone close to me asked for something I wasn't comfortable with. I respectfully declined. Instantly, they replied, "Wow, I thought you were different." That one sentence, so casual, so emotionally loaded, hit hard. For a moment, I felt guilty. I felt like explaining myself, justifying my no. But I stopped, took a breath, and replied, "I know what you're doing." That's all it took. Their eyes changed, their expression cracked. And just like that, the manipulation lost its grip. Because once you name it, it dies. So how do you handle manipulators with stoic grace? 1. Recognize the tactic. Ask yourself, is this truly a request? Or is this emotional pressure? 2. Stay calm and firm. The less reactive you are, the less power they have. 3. Refuse to explain excessively. You don't owe anyone an apology for having boundaries. A simple no is enough. In the end, manipulation only works if you give it your energy. The moment you stop defending yourself, stop explaining every choice, and stop feeling responsible for other people's reactions, you become unshakable. That is power. Your life is not a stage for someone else's performance. Let them act. You just exit the play. Part 2, they'll spread lies because the truth doesn't serve them. So, what happens when manipulation doesn't work? When your silence can't be baited into an argument and your no stands firm without apology? They shift to something darker. They begin to spread lies. And not the obvious kind. These aren't cartoon villains plotting in secret rooms, no. These lies are whispered in group chats. They're shaped as concerns in conversations where you're not present. They're seeded carefully, like poison in still water, distorting how others see you without ever giving you the chance to defend yourself. Why do they do it? Because your independence threatens the control they once had, and when someone can control you, the next best thing is to control the narrative about you. They can't silence your voice, so they work to ruin your name. This is where many of us fall into the trap. We think, I have to defend myself, I have to set the record straight. But what we don't realize is every time we chase after a lie, we give it weight. We validate the rumor just by acknowledging it. Like trying to clean mud off your clothes with more mud, we only get messier. Here's what the Stoics teach us. The truth doesn't scream. It doesn't panic. It doesn't need a spotlight to be real. Marcus Aurelius said, if you are unaffected by what is said, you have already won. That's not a suggestion, that's a battle strategy. Because the second you let your peace be disturbed by gossip, by whispers, by the desperate need to clear your name, you've already handed over your power. You're now reacting, not living. And that's exactly what they want. I remember a time when someone close to me, someone I had helped, supported, and trusted, began spinning a version of me that didn't exist. A version where I was cold, uncaring, dismissive, and worst of all, they did it not with accusations, but with suggestions, questions, passive worries about my character. At first, I wanted to shout, to email everyone and explain, to build a case like a lawyer in court. But then I realized the people who know me, the ones who've seen me in the quiet moments, those people don't need convincing. And the people who believe lies without asking me first, they were never in my corner to begin with. So I let the lies breathe, I let them move, I let them exist, and I didn't react. And something powerful happened. People began to see the truth, not because I told them, but because my actions never changed. Because while rumors travel fast, truth stands still, and eventually, the noise fades, the dust settles, the liar gets exposed. Not by confrontation, but by their own patterns. So how do you handle this with strength? 1. Don't engage. If you start fighting false stories, you become part of the drama. 2. Let your life do the talking. Your consistency, your character, those are your witnesses. 3. Protect your peace. Not everyone deserves access to your energy or your explanation. People who spread lies about you are not revealing who you are, they're exposing who they are, and when you understand that deeply, you stop defending yourself and start preserving yourself. Because here's the quiet truth. The people who really matter will see you, not through the lens of gossip, but through the lens of how you show up when no one's watching. And those who fall away, let them. Because if someone can be convinced to turn against you with nothing but a whisper, they were never meant to walk beside you in the first place. Stay calm, stay grounded, let them talk. Because while they're busy feeding the fire, you'll be building a life that outlives every false word ever said about you. Part 3. They play the victim and hope you'll play the villain. When direct control fails and lies don't land the way they hoped, there's one tactic manipulators often turn to, the victim card. And this isn't a cry for justice or healing, it's a performance. One designed to paint them as the wounded party while making you look like the aggressor. Because when they can't control your actions, they try to control how others perceive those actions. It's strategic, it's rehearsed, and for a while it works, until you stop feeding the script. This is how it plays out. You stand up for yourself, you draw a boundary, you express a truth that needs to be said, and instead of meeting you with maturity or conversation, they recoil, they exaggerate, they tell others how hurt they are, not because you were cruel, but because you were clear. And clarity, to someone who benefits from your confusion, always feels like an attack. Here's the stoic truth behind this tactic. When people fake victimhood, it's not about truth. It's about attention. It's not about being hurt. It's about staying in power. Playing the victim lets them manipulate without appearing controlling. And the more you try to explain or defend your side, the more you sink into the narrative they've designed for you. Suddenly, you're on their stage, reading lines you never agreed to. Imagine a scene. You speak up after being mistreated, they gasp, act shocked, and tell everyone how aggressive you were. Now they're gathering sympathy, while you're left wondering if you were too harsh, too abrupt, too much. But the game isn't about fairness, it's about control through perception. And if they can't get your compliance, they'll seek your collapse. This is where Stoicism saves you. Epictetus said, "A wise man does not allow others to dictate his emotions." That wisdom becomes your armor when someone weaponizes emotion to make you look like the enemy. The more detached you remain, the clearer others begin to see. People who are truly in pain seek healing, not applause. And those who crave an audience are often acting more than hurting. I once knew someone who did this masterfully. Anytime I held them accountable, even gently, they would tell others I had attacked them. It didn't matter how calmly I spoke or how respectfully I expressed myself. If I wasn't doing what they wanted, they would crumble into victimhood and cast me as the villain. And for a while, it worked. People pitied them and questioned me. But I refused to play along. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince anyone. I just lived my truth, consistently and quietly. And in time, the mask fell off. Their stories stopped making sense. Their contradictions caught up to them, and the truth began to speak, without me ever having to raise my voice. So how do you rise above this manipulation? First, don't step on the stage. If someone is clearly performing victimhood to gain attention or sympathy, stay off the script. Second, let your integrity do the talking. The more you live in alignment with your values, the less power a false story has over your identity. Third, and most importantly, protect your energy. You're not required to explain yourself to everyone who misunderstands you, especially not to those who are committed to misunderstanding you on purpose. At the end of the day, the performance will end, the spotlight fades, and the audience begins to ask questions, because lies unravel, and character, real character, always reveals itself over time. You just have to be patient enough not to take the bait. The world may not know your truth immediately, but that doesn't make it any less true. Let others talk, let them act, but don't join them. Stay grounded, stay silent, and let time do the heavy lifting. Because in the end, the person who refuses to be provoked, manipulated, or cast in a false role, that's the person who wins. Part 4. They try to isolate you because control is easier when you stand alone. Once manipulation fails, lies fall flat, and the victim card doesn't get them the reaction they wanted, there's another level, a deeper move they make behind the scenes. They try to isolate you, not in an obvious way, not by confronting you, but by slowly poisoning your connections, by planting seeds of doubt, by twisting your words behind your back, because they know that as long as you have strong relationships, people who believe in you, and a network that supports your truth, they can't get to you. So their goal becomes simple: cut the cords one by one. They might start with quiet suggestions. "I don't know if you can trust that person," or "I've noticed they've changed, haven't you?" Small statements meant to stir discomfort. Over time, those small doubts become divisions. Tension grows, trust erodes, and if you're not careful, you look around and realize you've become emotionally stranded, not because you pushed people away, but because someone else worked to disconnect you from them. Why would someone do this? Because the lonelier you feel, the easier you are to influence. It's the same strategy predators use in the wild. Separate the target from the pack, then strike. If they can pull you away from the people who affirm your worth, from the voices that remind you of who you are, then their own voice becomes louder by default. Not because it's true, but because it's the only one left. Here's where Stoic wisdom becomes not just a guide, but a shield. Seneca wrote, "Associate only with those who improve you. Avoid those who would pull you down." That is not just advice about friendship, it's a strategy for survival. In a world where some people thrive on power games, your circle becomes your sanctuary. You must choose it with intention. I've lived through this one too. I've felt the slow disconnection. It didn't start with arguments or confrontations, it started with silence. Friends who stopped reaching out, people who once called daily now answering with coldness, and only later did I discover that someone had been speaking for me, painting their version of events in private. My instinct was to chase, to call every person and explain, but instead I turned inward. I focused on my values. I showed up consistently, and over time the truth started to do its quiet work. The people who mattered came back, and the ones who didn't, they drifted for good. And that was their choice, not my loss. So how do you protect yourself when someone tries to isolate you? First, stay calm. Isolation is a trap that thrives on your panic. The more you try to chase people back, the more it looks like guilt. Second, strengthen your core relationships. Speak your truth, but let your actions be the evidence. Real connection can't be destroyed by gossip. It may get quiet, but it won't die. And finally, don't beg for closeness. If someone can be turned against you by a third party, they were never really walking with you. Let them go, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. At the end of the day, someone else's lies may move faster, but your truth has more endurance. Stay connected to what grounds you. Find the people who don't need a version of you, they just need you. Because when the manipulator's voice fades, when the drama ends, the only thing that remains is authenticity. And that's something no one can isolate you from, unless you give them permission. Part 5. They challenge your confidence, because doubt is easier to control than strength. When someone realizes they can't manipulate you emotionally, can't isolate you from others, and can't bend your boundaries with guilt or lies, they shift again. This time they aim for something much deeper, your confidence. They won't attack you outright. That's too obvious. Instead, they'll question your choices with a smile. They'll plant just enough doubt to make you second-guess yourself, because if they can't move you physically or emotionally, they'll try to weaken the foundation you stand on, your self-belief. It might come off as advice, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Or as subtle skepticism, "That seems a little risky, don't you think?" But make no mistake, their goal isn't to help you, it's to make you hesitate, because every ounce of hesitation gives them back a sliver of control. And control is what they're truly after. The more unsure you are, the easier it becomes for them to influence you. It's not about your decision being wrong. It's about them not being comfortable with how certain you are. Confidence, when rooted in experience and values, is threatening to people who've built their identity around approval. They don't understand how you move without asking, how you act without needing a cosign. So they try to chip away at it, one doubtful comment at a time, not to destroy you, but to make you small enough to manage. Imagine walking across a strong, stable bridge, but someone beside you keeps whispering, "Are you sure it'll hold?" over and over. The bridge hasn't changed, the structure is fine, but their voice, constant and subtle, begins to make you question something that was never weak to begin with. That's how it works. Your confidence may be solid, but a voice of doubt, if heard too often, starts to echo louder than the truth. This is where Stoicism shows its power. Epictetus said, "A person's worth is not determined by external approval." That's not just a principle, it's a way of seeing the world. Your confidence shouldn't be built on praise, it should be built on truth, on clarity, on quiet knowing. Because when your decisions are rooted in integrity and self-awareness, they don't need applause to be valid. I've walked through this too. I had someone in my life who always had something to say, always a raised eyebrow whenever I tried something bold. At first, I explained everything. I gave reasons, proof, justification. But I noticed something. They weren't listening to understand. They were listening to find cracks. So one day I stopped explaining. I just said, yes, I'm sure. No elaboration, no argument, there's certainty. And that one sentence ended the discussion, not because I won, but because I no longer played. So, how do you guard your confidence from quiet sabotage? First, trust your judgment. If you made a choice based on thought, values, and clarity, let that be enough. Second, stop over-explaining. The more you justify, the more space you give others to poke holes in your decision. Third, recognize that some people challenge your confidence not because they know better, but because your certainty makes them feel unsure of themselves. In the end, confidence isn't about being loud, it's about being steady. It's the stillness in you that says, even if no one claps, I'll keep walking. That's what threatens people who rely on control. Because you're no longer asking for permission, you're just moving forward, quietly, unapologetically. And that's a power they can't touch. Part 6, they provoke you emotionally because if you explode, they win. When nothing else works, when they can't manipulate your feelings, isolate your relationships, or chip away at your confidence, there's one more tool they reach for: provocation, emotional triggers. They'll say things that cut deep, not because they want a real conversation, but because they want a reaction. Not because they care about resolving anything, but because they want you to lose control. Because the moment you snap, they get to point and say, "See, I told you they were the problem." It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. When logic fails, when manipulation fails, when silence fails, they go for the jugular. Not physically, but emotionally. They push your buttons. They bring up old wounds. They mock your values. They twist your words, all so they can watch you erupt and then step back, hands clean, acting like the innocent bystander. Like they were just trying to talk. And if you're not careful, it works. Because we're human. We feel. We get angry. We want justice. We want to defend ourselves. But here's the truth. They don't care about your defense. They care about your reaction. Because that reaction gives them proof, not of the truth, but of the story they want others to believe. Now picture your emotions like a flame, and them like the wind. The more you respond with anger, the more fuel you give the fire. But what happens if you don't react? If you protect your peace instead? The fire starves. It dies out. That's where your power lives, in restraint, in the ability to feel something fully, and still not hand it over to someone who only wants to misuse it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And it's true. The moment you stay calm in the face of provocation, you rob them of their weapon. You show them you're not controllable. Not through guilt, not through fear, and especially not through anger. I remember someone once tried to bait me during a tough period in my life. They said things they knew would get under my skin. They brought up past mistakes, exaggerated stories, twisted facts. I felt it, the heat rising, the urge to fight back, to shut it down with truth. But instead I just said, "Interesting perspective." Nothing more, no explanation, no rebuttal, just peace. They were stunned because they had come for a war, and I refused to show up. So how do you respond when someone tries to provoke you? First, recognize the pattern. Ask yourself, do they want resolution or a reaction? Second, pause, breathe. Give yourself a moment before you speak. Third, walk away when needed. Not every battle is yours to fight. Not every insult deserves your voice. Your emotional energy is sacred. You don't owe it to people who see your anger as entertainment. You don't owe it to those who only feel strong when you feel weak. You owe it to yourself to protect your stillness like it's gold, because it is. And when you stay calm, detached, and unbothered, they don't just lose control over you, They lose the story they were trying to write. Part 7. They copy you because they can't create what you have within. There's a tactic people use that might not look toxic at first. In fact, it might feel flattering, but over time it starts to feel strange, hollow, familiar in the wrong way. It's when they begin to copy you, your words, your style, your ideas, even your mindset. At first, it seems innocent, maybe even a compliment, but then it keeps happening, and you start to realize they're not inspired. They're imitating because they don't want to grow beside you. They want to replicate you and claim it as their own. When people can't outshine you, when they can't move you, challenge you, or control you, they start to mimic you, not to honor you, but to compete without having to build anything from within. It's not about admiration. It's about replacing your originality with their imitation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Copying is not flattery when it comes from insecurity. It's not respect, it's desperation, because they don't want to do the inner work to find their voice, their path, their truth. It's easier to echo yours, to walk in your footsteps and hope no one notices the lack of soul in their performance. But the truth always shows, because imitation may look like you from a distance, but it never feels like you. It lacks the essence, the journey, the fire behind your words, the scars behind your wisdom. That can't be faked. That can't be borrowed. It can only be lived. And the people who matter, the ones who see you for who you really are, they can tell the difference. Seneca said, "Character, not imitation, defines a person." And that's the Stoic principle that will ground you when you feel like someone is stealing parts of your voice. Your worth doesn't come from being the loudest. It comes from being the most rooted, the most real, the most unshakably you. I've experienced this too. People I knew started adopting my language, my ideas, even my phrases, almost word for word. At first I was annoyed, frustrated. I felt like something was being taken. But then I realized what they were copying was only the surface. They couldn't copy the hours I spent in silence to earn that insight. They couldn't copy the pain behind the wisdom, the growth behind the words. So I let it go, because the more I evolved, the more they had to catch up. And eventually, they couldn't. So how do you deal with people who copy you? First, stop obsessing over it. If they're imitating, they're already behind. Second, keep growing. The more you expand, the harder it becomes for them to follow. Third, never lower yourself to call them out of spite. Let your originality speak through evolution, not confrontation. In the end, copies fade, but authenticity lasts. The world doesn't need more echoes. It needs more people willing to be completely themselves, no matter who's watching, no matter who's imitating. You don't need to compete with anyone who's trying to become you, because while they're busy copying, you're already creating something new, something real, something only you can bring into this world. Part 8. They wait for you to fail because your success threatens their insecurity. There's one final move people make when all else fails, when they can't manipulate you, isolate you, shake your confidence, or imitate your power. They sit quietly on the sidelines and wait. Not to celebrate your growth, not to cheer for your success, but to catch the moment you stumble. Because to them, your strength is a mirror, and every step you take forward reflects back what they're unwilling to face in themselves. And so, if they can't rise to your level, they wait for you to fall to theirs. They smile when you speak of your dreams, nod politely when you make plans, maybe even say, "I'm happy for you," but beneath it there's a quiet hope that you'll fail, that you'll prove them right, that your boldness was just arrogance, that your independence was just a phase, and when you hit a rough patch, they're the first to say, "See? I knew it." This is where many people lose themselves, trying to prove others wrong, pouring energy into validation, into performance, into revenge through success. But the Stoic path isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about growth, clarity, mastery. Not because someone doubted you, but because you're committed to becoming your fullest self regardless of who's watching. The people who wait for your failure aren't your enemies. They're your reminder. A reminder to stop looking outward for support and start looking inward for alignment. Because anyone who's truly rooting for you doesn't keep score. They don't wait for the crash. They walk with you through the climb and the fall. Their support doesn't come with a timer. It comes with trust. Epictetus said, "Do not waste energy on those who hope for your downfall." And he meant it, because the more you focus on trying to win in their eyes, the further you drift from what actually matters: your focus, your peace, your purpose. Success that comes from spite is never sustainable, but success that comes from presence, that's the kind that lasts. I've had people like this in my own life, quiet critics, people who never had much to say until something went wrong. Then they appeared, offering disguised concern that sounded a lot like satisfaction. I was worried that would happen. I figured that might be too much for you. And I realized they weren't waiting to support me, they were waiting to be right. And I stopped feeding that. I stopped seeking their applause. I stopped offering updates. I let my growth happen in silence. And when the results came, their silence said everything. So, how do you protect your journey from those hoping to see you fail? First, recognize the signs. If someone disappears during your wins and only shows up during your losses, take note. Second, stop performing. You don't need to succeed for anyone but yourself. And third, let your growth be steady, quiet, and real. Nothing disturbs those rooting for your failure more than the calm rise of someone who simply refuses to quit. At the end of the day, your success is not for them to believe in, it's for you to embody. Don't give them the satisfaction of a fall. And don't give them the energy of your attention. Just keep going, keep becoming. Because while they wait in the shadows hoping for your collapse, you're out there building something they'll never understand. A life driven by truth, not ego. By peace, not approval. And by discipline, not drama. That's the Stoic way. And that's the kind of strength no one can stop. Thank you for spending your time with the Chill Stoic. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to reflect, breathe, and carry it with you into tomorrow. And if you found peace in these words, consider subscribing to stay grounded in more timeless wisdom. Until next time, stay calm, stay true, and stay unshakable.